Have you ever been blindsided by a betrayal that cuts deeper than you ever thought possible? Imagine living your life, trusting the people around you, believing that your world is perfect, only to find out when it's too late that the very foundation of your relationships has been shattered. This is exactly what happened to me when my husband passed away, and I discovered that he had written a will, and I wasn't in it. But my sister, well, she was. First, it didn't make sense. How could this happen? We were supposed to be a family, bound by trust, love, and loyalty. But what do you do when the ones you thought you could rely on betray you in the worst possible way? What happens when family secrets, hidden agendas, and shocking revelations turn everything you thought you knew about love, marriage, and sisterhood upside down? In this video, I'll take you through the unimaginable journey of how I found myself caught in the middle of a will dispute that revealed deep family betrayals, trust issues, and emotional heartbreak. Stick around because by the end, you might just realize the importance of protecting your own boundaries, understanding your worth, and facing the truth head-on, no matter how painful it may be. Before we dive into the full story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel for more, and leave a comment below if you've ever had to face betrayal from someone close to you. I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. For as long as I can remember, life with my twin sister was like living in a fairy tale. We were inseparable, the two of us against the world. People often joked about how we shared everything: our clothes, our friends, our secrets, and even our dreams for the future. It was a bond that seemed unbreakable, something that would last a lifetime. I always thought that if anyone truly understood me, it was her. We were more than sisters. We were reflections of each other, like two halves of the same whole. But little did I know, beneath the surface of our perfect lives, there was a storm brewing, one that would shatter everything I thought I knew. I was the kind of person who trusted wholeheartedly. I didn't question the people closest to me, especially my twin. She was my best friend, my confidant, the one person who knew me better than anyone else. I never had a reason to doubt her. We were a team, right? At least that's what I thought. In every part of our lives we were aligned. Our thoughts, our decisions, our ambitions. It felt like there was no space for betrayal, no room for deception. How could there be? We were in sync with each other, like two pieces of a puzzle that fit perfectly together. But as I would come to realize, even the closest of bonds can hide the most devastating betrayals. I remember feeling so secure in the life I had built. My marriage was solid, my career was going well, and the future looked bright. But then things started to shift ever so slightly, in ways that were hard to pinpoint at first. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Maybe it was just the stress of everyday life, or perhaps I was simply overthinking. But there was an unsettling feeling creeping in, a feeling that something was wrong, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It was the kind of feeling you get when you realize that the foundation of everything you believed in might not be as solid as you thought. The reality was that I had no idea that a storm was coming. I couldn't have predicted the emotional betrayal that would come from the one person I trusted most. The thought that my twin sister, someone I had shared my entire life with, would betray me was unimaginable. It was as if the world I had built, the life I thought I had, was nothing more than an illusion. But that's what makes betrayal so powerful, isn't it? It's not just about the act itself. It's about the way it shatters your entire perception of reality, leaving you questioning everything you thought you knew about the people you love. And that's how it began. The life I thought I had, perfect, safe, unshakable, was crumbling, and I didn't even see it coming. The trust one placed in my sister was about to be shattered in ways I could never have predicted, and the impact would ripple through every aspect of my life. But in the midst of this chaos, there was something even bigger at play, something that would expose not just the betrayal, but a whole web of lies, deceit, and secrets that had been buried for far too long. So, there I was, caught in this emotional whirlwind, with no idea how it would all unfold. What had started as a small shift in my reality was about to become the most shocking revelation of my life. And little did I know, this was just the beginning of an unimaginable journey filled with family drama, financial betrayal, and a will that would change everything. At first, the changes in my sister's behavior were so small, so subtle, that I almost brushed them off. It's like when you hear a tiny crack in the floorboards and think it's just the house settling. You don't give it much thought, until one day you realize the crack has turned into a huge split that could bring everything crashing down. That's exactly how it happened with my twin sister. Small, seemingly insignificant things that I chose to ignore or rationalize, thinking I was just being paranoid. I mean, she was my twin. We'd been through everything together, and nothing could break that bond. Or so I thought. It started with her being a little more distant. She used to be the first one to text me to check in on how I was doing, or to gossip about the latest drama. But slowly, those little messages started to taper off. At first, I told myself it was probably because she was busy. After all, we both had lives to live, right? But then there were the moments when I caught her acting strangely around me. She would give me these looks, almost like she was sizing me up, as if she were trying to figure out how much I knew or what I was thinking. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it made me feel uneasy. And then came the phone calls. I would hear her on the phone talking to someone, her voice a little too bright, a little too careful. Whenever I asked her who it was, she'd always say it was just a friend. But the tone of her voice would change, becoming a bit more guarded. I began to wonder if I was overthinking things, but there was always this nagging feeling in the back of my mind that something wasn't right. After all, why was she suddenly so secretive? Why were there things she didn't feel the need to share with me anymore? The changes in her behavior were subtle, but they began to add up. She stopped showing up to family events, or if she did, she was distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. At first, I thought she might be dealing with something personal, some stress in her own life that she didn't want to talk about. I didn't push her, respecting her privacy. But as time went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping between us. I began to notice that her life seemed to be moving in a completely different direction, while I was still stuck in the same place. She was making decisions that felt off. She was becoming more independent, more secretive, and less engaged with me. And still I kept telling myself that it was nothing. Couldn't be anything. After all, it was just a phase, right? I told myself it was probably just growing pains or maybe even a reflection of how our lives were evolving. She was a grown adult and so was I. We were bound to grow apart in some ways. But every time I would try to talk to her about it, the distance would grow even more. The conversations became shorter, the exchanges more strained. I began to feel like a stranger to my own sister, like I didn't know her anymore. But what was really strange was the sudden change in her relationship with my husband. At first, I chalked it up to her just being friendly, but then I started noticing that she was spending more time with him when I wasn't around. She would text him, make plans to hang out without me, and there was this shift in the dynamic between them that left me feeling, well, uncomfortable. I didn't want to overreact. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But the more I saw, the more I started to realize that something was brewing under the surface. Looking back, those were the first signs of the betrayal to come, the subtle shifts in behavior that I didn't want to see. I guess I was too trusting, too naive to recognize the cracks forming in my own life. But as the days went by, those cracks only got wider. Something was happening, something that would turn my entire world upside down. And still I tried to ignore it, hoping that it was just a phase, hoping that the bond one shared with my sister could survive whatever was causing the rift. But deep down I knew something was off, and I had no idea how much worse it would get. I'll never forget the exact moment everything came crashing down. It wasn't some dramatic confrontation or a big, loud revelation. It was a small detail, a simple slip-up that made everything click into place. But when it happened, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. My world, as I knew it, shattered in an instant. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I had just come back from running some errands. My husband, who had been acting a little distant recently, though I couldn't quite pinpoint why, was in the living room on the phone. I didn't think much of it at first. It wasn't unusual for him to take calls. He worked a lot, and sometimes he'd need to step away to deal with business matters. But as I passed by, I overheard something that froze me in my tracks. It wasn't what he said, it was who he was talking to. My twin sister. The way she was laughing, the tone of their conversation, the familiarity in her voice. It was all wrong. Now let me pause here and tell you. There are moments in life when you just know something is off. You can't explain it, but your gut tells you that something isn't right. That was one of those moments. The more I listened, the more uneasy I became. It wasn't just casual chit-chat. It was personal. There was an intimacy in their exchange that made my heart sink. They were talking about things I hadn't shared with anyone. Personal details, about me, about my life that I had never told her but that she knew. My sister knew things about me that only I should have known. I felt my blood run cold. The room seemed to close in around me. I had this terrible realization. My twin sister, the one person I thought I could trust above everyone else, was hiding something from me. Something huge. She was involved in something. Something I hadn't even begun to fathom. But what? Why? Why hadn't she told me? Why was she speaking to my husband in such a familiar way? I tried to shake it off. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe I was just overthinking things. So I tried to act normal. I played it cool, didn't let on that I'd heard anything. But as soon as I could, I texted my sister. I tried to sound casual, asking her how she'd been. She texted me back immediately, but there was something off in her response. She was too quick to tell me everything was fine, too eager to change the subject. I pressed her a little, just a small, innocent question about her plans for the weekend. And that's when it happened, the moment I'll never forget. A slip. For just a second, I could hear the hesitation in her voice. She had mentioned plans with my husband, plans that I didn't know about. She was vague about the details, but I caught the slip. My heart raced. This was it. This was the moment when everything I had trusted, everything I had believed about my sister, crumbled. I felt betrayed, hurt, confused, all at once. My mind raced through 1,000 possibilities, none of them making any sense. Was my sister hiding something from me? Was she and my husband secretly? I couldn't finish the thought. Well, that wasn't possible. But the evidence was right there in front of me, undeniable. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I needed to know the truth. So I confronted my husband. I asked him straight out about the phone call about my sister. He seemed shocked at first, almost defensive. But then I asked him about the things I'd overheard, the little details that he shouldn't have known unless they were talking behind my back. I'll never forget his face. It was a mix of guilt and shock, a combination of emotions that made me feel physically ill. And that was the moment. That was when everything changed. In that conversation, I discovered the depth of the deception that had been happening right under my nose. My husband had been confiding in my sister about things I never knew. Things I never should have found out this way. It was a slap in the face. I felt numb, like the floor had been pulled out from under me. But it didn't stop there. This revelation opened the door to even more shocking truths. As I pushed them both for answers, the lies started to unravel. My sister wasn't just talking to my husband behind my back. She was living my life. She had been sneaking into my world, pretending to be me, taking over my relationships, my job, even my social life. The shocking truth hit me like a freight train. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was personal. It was everything. How could I have missed all these signs? How did I not see the red flags before? My entire reality was built on a lie. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that what my twin sister had done wasn't just a betrayal. It was a full-blown invasion of my life. It wasn't enough for her to have her own life. No, she had to steal mine. And the scariest part, I had no idea it was happening until it was too late. Imagine waking up one morning to find that someone has been living your life without you even knowing. Someone who knows your routines, your habits, your friends, your relationships. Someone who's been impersonating you not just in little ways but in every single area of your life. That's exactly what my sister did. She took over my life, my identity, my friendships, even my marriage. The more I thought about it, the more disturbing it became. First, I thought it was just a coincidence. Maybe she just hung out with my friends a little too much. Maybe they'd gone to one or two places I normally went to. But then I started to notice the bigger things. The things that didn't add up. Like how she would show up at events, at dinners, or even at work functions where I should have been, but I wasn't there. And she didn't just show up. She acted like she was me. It was as if she had studied my life like a script. She knew the right things to say, the right places to go, the right people to talk to. I started getting texts and calls from people asking if I was okay, because they hadn't seen me in a while, but they'd seen her. Dressed like me, talking like me, even laughing like me. It was unnerving. My own friends and colleagues were getting confused. "Are you okay?" they'd ask. "You seemed different the last time we saw you." I felt like I was losing my grip on who I was. People were seeing her as me, and worse, they were believing it. It felt like I was slowly fading into the background while my sister was stealing everything that was mine. I couldn't escape it. Every time I went to see someone or talk to someone I knew, I was confronted by this image of my life that wasn't mine anymore. It was hers. I couldn't even recognize the world I had built, because she was living in it. She was living my dreams, my reality, my relationships. What made it worse was how well she pulled it off. She wasn't just trying to act like me in passing. No, she was actively replacing me. At work, she took over my projects, my responsibilities. People at my office started praising her for the amazing job she was doing. My friends were inviting her out to lunch as if she were me, asking about my new hobbies, my new interests. She didn't just take over my life. She erased my existence piece by piece. And I was left on the sidelines, confused and hurt, watching my twin sister enjoy the life that was supposed to be mine. It wasn't just about what she took from me. It was about the fact that she had stolen my sense of self. Every day I felt more lost. Who was I if she was living my life? And what was worse, I didn't even know how deep it went. Had she been planning this for years? Had she always wanted to be me? One of the most disturbing things was realizing that my sister didn't just want my life for herself. She didn't even want me to have it. It was as if she had intentionally set out to destroy who I was, and she was doing it with such ease. She wasn't just imitating me, she was erasing me. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How dare she take everything I had worked for, everything I had built, and pretend it was hers? I wish I could say that I handled it all with grace, that I found some inner strength to rise above it all. But the truth is, I didn't. I felt like I was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to shout, to make people understand what was happening. But every time I did, I was met with confusion. No one could see the truth except me. It was as if the world had been tricked into believing my sister was the real me. And I was the fake. And the worst part, she was loving it. She had no remorse. There was no apology. In fact, I realized later on that she was feeding off of my pain. The more I struggled to figure out who I was, the more she thrived. Every time I doubted myself, every time I felt lost or insecure, she grew stronger. She was living my life, while I was drowning in her shadow. But I couldn't let it go on forever. I knew I had to take control back. I couldn't allow her to continue erasing me, my life, my memories. Something had to change. As if stealing my life wasn't enough, my twin sister didn't stop there. She didn't just take over my identity. She manipulated everyone around us. People I had known for years, friends I had trusted, and even family members, they all fell under her spell. And the worst part, she did it with such ease, with such grace, that it almost felt like I was the one in the wrong. When I first started to piece together what was going on, I was angry. I was hurt, of course, but I also felt betrayed in a way I had never felt before. You see, my twin sister wasn't just living my life behind my back. She was actively making sure that no one believed me when I tried to speak out about what was happening. She manipulated everyone into thinking that I was the one being paranoid, that I was imagining things. She turned my own family and friends against me. The first sign of her manipulation was when I tried to talk to my parents about the strange behavior I had been noticing. I remember sitting down with them, feeling the weight of everything on my shoulders, and telling them that something wasn't right. But instead of understanding, they brushed me off. They said I was overreacting, that I was just being dramatic. They told me it was just a phase and that I needed to let it go. That was the first sting. The first realization that my sister wasn't just taking over my life. She was also turning everyone I loved against me. My parents didn't see what was happening, and neither did my friends. In fact, when I tried to confront them, I was met with the same thing: doubt. It was as if she had already spun a web around everyone, and I was the one left out in the cold, trying to tear it down. What I hadn't realized then was how much she had planted seeds of doubt in their minds. Every time she impersonated me, every time she took over my role in a relationship, she made sure to leave behind a trail of confusion. She would whisper things to my friends, make them question me. She would twist my words, change the narrative, and paint herself as the innocent one while I was the troubled twin. I can't even count how many times people came to me and said things like, "Are you sure you're okay?" Or, "We've noticed you've been acting differently." And each time I felt like I was sinking further. It wasn't just about the betrayal from my sister anymore. It was about the fact that the people I trusted, the people I thought knew me, had all been manipulated. They didn't see me anymore. They saw her. And she wasn't just doing this with my friends. She was doing it with everyone, our family, even my husband. She knew exactly how to play each person, how to pull at their heartstrings. She would show up to family gatherings, acting as if everything was perfectly normal. But it wasn't normal. Nothing was normal. She was stealing my role, my place in the family. And the more she did it, the more I felt like a stranger in my own life. At one point, I even noticed that my husband, the man I had been married to for years, started treating me differently. It wasn't blatant, but I could feel the shift. He started asking questions that didn't make sense, questioning things that only I should have known. He didn't understand why I was upset, why I was so anxious. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. She had gotten to him too. It wasn't just that she had been impersonating me. She had made everyone believe that I was the one who had changed, that I was the one who had become distant, even though I was the one who had been living my life all along. She had painted a picture of me as someone I wasn't, and people believed her. The emotional betrayal of it all was overwhelming. It was like I was losing myself, not just to her actions, but to the people I loved. I couldn't even go to my own family for support, because they didn't see the truth. And that was perhaps the hardest part, facing the fact that I was completely isolated. My sister had cleverly turned my world upside down, and I was alone in a world where no one seemed to believe my truth. The deeper I dug, the more I uncovered. She wasn't just impersonating me for fun. She was doing it to sabotage my relationships, to take everything I had. It was a calculated move, and it was working. My sister was not just living my life. She was manipulating everyone around me to ensure that no one would ever question her. She was making me disappear, one person at a time. But as hard as it was, I knew I couldn't let her continue. I had to stand up for myself. I had to make people see the truth. But how could I do that when everyone I loved was on her side? The day I finally confronted my twin sister was like something out of a nightmare. It was one of those moments in life that you never quite expect to happen, but once it does, it changes everything. For so long I had tried to avoid believing what I was seeing, what I was feeling. But the truth was undeniable now. I had the proof, and it was time to face the reality of what she had done to me. I had spent days, maybe even weeks, thinking about how I was going to approach her. My heart was pounding in my chest every time I thought about it. What would I say? How would I say it? Would she admit to everything, or would she deny it? The questions were endless, but there was one thing I knew for sure. I needed to confront her. I remember the day I decided to do it. It was a typical afternoon. I had just gotten off the phone with one of our cousins, and during the conversation, I'd learned that my sister had been at a family event pretending to be me. Again. It was the last straw. The betrayal was too much, and I couldn't hold it in any longer. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I called her, my voice shaky as I tried to stay calm. She picked up after a few rings, and I could already hear the fake cheerfulness in her voice, the same tone she always used when she thought everything was fine. But this time, I wasn't going to let her control the narrative. "Where are you?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my body bracing itself for what was about to come. "I'm out with some friends." "Why?" "What's up?" she replied, her tone casual, like nothing was wrong. But I could hear the nervousness in her voice. Just barely. "I need to talk to you. Right now." There was a pause, then a sigh. I could practically hear her thinking, trying to come up with a lie to deflect me. But I wasn't having it anymore. I told her I was on my way to meet her. My heart was pounding louder with each step I took. What would happen when I finally laid it all out there? What would she say? Could she deny everything? Or would she finally admit to the years of deception? When I walked into the room, she was sitting there, looking as calm as ever. But her eyes betrayed her. I could see the panic lurking just beneath the surface. She knew what was coming. And for the first time in a long time, I had the upper hand. I didn't waste any time. I jumped straight to it. "Why have you been pretending to be me?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with a quiet rage. "Why have you been living my life?" She didn't say anything at first. She just stared at me, her face turning pale. For a moment I thought she might actually come clean. But then the mask slipped back on. She tried to act surprised, like she had no idea what I was talking about. "Are you serious?" she asked, trying to laugh it off. "You're being crazy. What are you talking about?" But I had all the proof I needed. I wasn't about to let her spin another lie. I pulled out the messages, the photos, the receipts, everything that showed how she had been living my life, taking over my relationships, my career, and even my personal moments. The evidence was undeniable. Her face went from confused to guilty in a matter of seconds. She looked down at the floor, clearly trying to avoid my gaze. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The person I had trusted the most, the person I had shared everything with, was now looking at me like a stranger. I had always thought that no matter what, we would always have each other's backs. But now I was staring at someone who had destroyed everything we ever shared. When she finally spoke, it wasn't an apology. It wasn't an explanation. It was more of a weak defense. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said quietly, her voice shaking. I just wanted to have your life. I wanted what you had." My stomach churned as the words left her lips. I couldn't even wrap my mind around it. All this time, she had been pretending to be me because she was jealous. Didn't make sense. I thought we were the closest people in the world. And now, here she was, admitting to this awful betrayal like it was nothing. I felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The trust we had built over our entire lives had been shattered in an instant. There was no going back from this. No matter how much I wanted to understand why she did it, the truth was clear. She had crossed a line, and it was a line I couldn't forgive. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to know everything. I needed to hear her explain how far she had gone. Why did she take things this far? Why was I left in the dark while she took over everything I had worked for? The questions were endless, and they kept coming, one after the other. But no matter how much I asked, I didn't get the answers I needed. Instead, I got more excuses, more lies, and more manipulation. It was heartbreaking. The person I had trusted the most, the person I had shared everything with, was now the one who had caused me the most pain. Had to walk away. I couldn't keep listening to her try to justify the unthinkable. That conversation marked the end of our relationship as I knew it. It wasn't just about the betrayal anymore. It was about the fact that I could never look at her the same way again. I had tried to confront her to get the truth, but all I got in return was more deception, more emotional manipulation. And that, in the end, was the hardest part. Not just losing the life I thought I had, but losing the person I thought I knew the best. The moment the truth about my twin sister's betrayal spread through the family, everything changed. I never imagined that what seemed like a personal problem between us would explode into full-blown family chaos. It was as if a bomb had gone off, and the aftermath was far worse than I could have ever anticipated. I knew this wouldn't be easy. I mean, how could it be? How do you explain to your family that your twin sister, your closest confidant, your other half, has been living your life, pretending to be you for years? It's a betrayal on a scale I could never have fathomed. But when the word got out, it didn't just affect me. It affected everyone. The first call I made after confronting my sister was to our parents. My heart was in my throat as I tried to find the right words to explain what had happened. How do you even begin to break that kind of news? How do you tell the people who've known you your entire life that their daughter, my twin sister, had been pretending to be me? I could hear my mom's gasp on the other end of the line. She didn't speak at first. She just let out a soft, stunned sound, like she couldn't believe what I was saying. My dad, ever the skeptic, kept asking for more details. How could it be possible? What was I talking about? I tried to explain it to them as best I could, but honestly, it felt like no matter what I said, they couldn't grasp the full extent of the betrayal. How could they? It seemed too outlandish to even comprehend. As the days went on, the news spread like wildfire. Relatives began calling, asking questions, demanding answers. Some were angry, some were confused, and some just couldn't believe it. Everyone had a reaction, and none of them were the ones I had hoped for. The worst part was that my sister, my twin, was spinning her own version of the story. She told everyone I was the one who had overreacted, that I was being dramatic, and that nothing was as bad as I was making it seem. It was the same manipulative behavior that had been going on for years, but now it was all out in the open. I can't even describe the emotional roller coaster I was on during those days. One moment, I'd be on the phone with a cousin, explaining the betrayal to them, and the next moment, I'd be facing the reality of how many people in my family were still taking her side. It was like I was living in a nightmare where no one could see the truth, or worse, they didn't want to see it. The trust within the family was completely shattered. My parents, who had always seen us as two peas in a pod, were now faced with the ugly reality of what their daughters had become. I could see the strain on their faces, the disbelief in their eyes. My mom tried to hold it together, but I could tell she was hurt in a way I'd never seen before. She couldn't wrap her head around how one daughter could hurt the other so deeply. And my father, well, he was furious. He didn't mince words. I remember one conversation where he told me, "This is a mess. And it's your sister's fault." It was the first time I had heard him talk so bluntly, but I appreciated it. He was upset, and rightfully so. But there was something about his anger that made me feel like he wasn't seeing the full picture. It wasn't just my sister's fault. It was a family failure. There had been years of lies, manipulation, and trust issues, and we were all complicit to some extent. No one had seen it, or at least no one had wanted to see it. The fallout wasn't just emotional, though. There was a tangible ripple effect that went through everything. My relationships with other family members became strained. I remember sitting at a family dinner just a few weeks later, and the atmosphere was so thick with tension that you could feel it in the air. No one knew what to say. Everyone had heard the stories, and no one knew whose side to take. The silence was deafening. At some point I realized that the family I had known, This unit I had been a part of for so long was forever changed. The bond that had held us together had been broken, and it wasn't just about me and my sister anymore. It was about everyone. Everyone was hurt. Everyone was questioning everything. I tried, desperately, to hold on to some sense of normalcy. I reached out to my cousins, aunts, and uncles, trying to salvage the relationships that were slipping away. But it wasn't easy. Some were on my side, others weren't, and some just didn't know how to react. The complexity of the situation was overwhelming, and I found myself feeling more isolated with each passing day. The betrayal my sister had caused wasn't just a personal issue anymore. It was a family issue, and no matter how hard I tried to explain it, no one could truly understand the pain I was going through. The emotional fallout was palpable, and it was like a cloud hanging over every family event, every gathering. People walked on eggshells, afraid to say the wrong thing, but still carrying the weight of the situation on their shoulders. It was during this time that I started to realize something important. The betrayal wasn't just about my sister's actions. It was about the deeper issues within our family, the unspoken resentments, the secrets, and the lack of communication. It had taken something as big as this to finally bring it all to the surface. I wasn't sure how to fix it or if it could be fixed at all. The trust issues were too deep, and the emotional heartbreak was too raw. But one thing was clear. The chaos was just beginning. As I stood in the middle of it all, I knew there was no going back to the way things had been. The family I had once known, the one I had trusted, would never be the same again. After everything blew up and the truth about my twin sister's deception became public, I thought I knew everything. I believed that once we uncovered the extent of her betrayal, that she had been living my life, impersonating me. I'd been hit with the worst of it. But I was wrong. We're wrong. There was more. So much more. And as I began to dig deeper into what had really been happening behind the scenes, I realized just how many layers of lies my sister had wrapped herself in. What started as a shock turned into a full-blown revelation that rocked me to my core. The first thing I discovered wasn't even something I had suspected. It was a financial issue, something that had been quietly brewing while I was oblivious. I'd always known my sister had a tendency to be a bit manipulative when it came to money, but it wasn't until I looked closer that I found out how deep her financial betrayal had run. I had been living my life, thinking everything was fine, when in fact, she had been siphoning off my resources. I'm talking about everything from my bank accounts to investments that I had made with the intention of securing my future. Somehow, someway, she had found a way to tap into my personal finances and start redirecting funds into her own pockets. It wasn't until I went through my accounts and discovered a series of questionable transactions that I realized just how far she had gone. At first, I thought it was a mistake, a glitch, something that could easily be explained away. But as I followed the trail, piece by piece, I came to the horrible realization that she had been strategically stealing from me for years. The money I had earned through hard work, saved for a house, for retirement, for my future, was no longer mine. She had taken it. The shock of discovering this left me numb. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was something far more insidious. My sister had been using me for financial gain, while pretending to be me in every aspect of my life. The weight of it all almost crushed me. But it didn't stop there. No. There was more, and it was almost too much to bear. As I started to confront the people around me, family, friends, acquaintances, it became clear that my sister had been spinning a web of lies not just about me, but about everything. She had created a whole alternate reality in which she was living a life that wasn't hers. And somehow everyone had been fooled. Everyone except me. One of the most shocking things I discovered was how my sister had been manipulating our parents and extended family. She had managed to convince them that I was the one who had been acting strangely, that I was the one who had distanced myself, and that I was the cause of all the tension between us. For years, she had been feeding them half-truths, painting me as someone who was emotionally distant, someone who couldn't be trusted. I had no idea that my sister had been working behind the scenes to turn everyone against me, slowly but surely. I remember calling one of my cousins after I found out. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once, but I had to ask, "Why didn't you ever question her?" And she admitted to me that my sister had been so convincing, so manipulative, that no one even thought to question her version of the story. She had painted me as the villain in this narrative, and everyone had bought it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand answers. How could they all have been so easily fooled? But the more I dug, the more I realized how deep her deception ran. It wasn't just one lie here and there. It was years of careful, calculated manipulation. She had convinced people that I was the one causing the family drama, not her. She had built a story so convincing that even my own family members couldn't see the truth. In many ways, I felt like I was living in an alternate universe. Everything I thought I knew was a lie. My sister wasn't just living my life. She had been stealing from me in every sense of the word. Emotionally, financially, and mentally. The person I thought I knew so well had become a complete stranger. And the worst part, I had let her. As I confronted her about the financial betrayal, she didn't even seem remorseful. It was like she expected me to forgive her, like this was all just part of the game she had been playing. She brushed it off with a smirk, as if I was the one who was overreacting. And that's when I realized that this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was a pattern. My sister's deception ran deeper than I could have imagined. But what hit me the hardest wasn't just the financial manipulation or the lies she had told everyone around us. It was the realization that she had known exactly what she was doing. She had calculated every move, every lie, every little detail. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. She had deliberately destroyed our relationship, our family, and my trust in her. And now, I had to pick up the pieces of a life that felt like it had been shattered beyond repair. As I continued to uncover more and more about her double life, the emotional weight became unbearable. How could someone who had been my closest ally, my twin sister, turn into this person? How could she betray me so completely, and so intentionally? The truth hurt, but there was no turning back now. What I didn't realize at the time was that the lies my sister had told were only the beginning. The emotional fallout was still to come, and the road ahead was going to be long and difficult. After everything came crashing down, after the shock of discovering my twin sister's betrayal and the emotional fallout that followed, I was left in a state of utter disbelief. I was shattered not just emotionally but physically, mentally, and spiritually. It felt like I was waking up in someone else's life, someone I didn't recognize. I didn't know how to move forward from this, but I had to. The first thing I did was take a step back and just breathe. I needed time to process it all. It was as though my entire world had turned upside down. The life I thought I had, the one I had worked so hard to build, was now a distant memory, and I was forced to reckon with the harsh reality of how deep my sister's betrayal had run. My mind raced as I reflected on everything that had happened. The will dispute, the financial betrayal, the shocking revelations, and the destruction of my relationship with my own family. But at the same time, I knew that staying in that place of anger, hurt, and disbelief wasn't going to help me reclaim what I had lost. I had to rebuild. But where do you even start when it feels like you've lost everything? That was the first question I asked myself. The answer didn't come right away, but eventually, I realized that it had to start with me. I had to rediscover who I was without my sister's influence in my life, without the manipulation and the emotional chaos she had created. I had to learn to trust myself again, even when it seemed impossible, so I began by focusing on myself. I started small, really small. Simple things like taking walks in the park, reading books that I loved, and cooking meals just for me. These were little moments of peace, moments where I could feel grounded in the present, without being overwhelmed by the weight of everything that had happened. It might sound trivial, but in the aftermath of a betrayal of this magnitude, those small, everyday actions were what helped me find my footing again. But emotional recovery wasn't just about taking care of my body and mind in small ways. It was also about confronting the larger issues. One of the hardest things I had to face was the idea that I might never fully trust my family again. The realization that my twin sister's manipulation had been so effective, that even those closest to me had been fooled, was devastating. I had spent my entire life believing in the bonds of family, in the idea that family always had your back no matter what. But that belief had been shattered. How could I trust anyone again? How could I trust that they weren't hiding their own secrets, or even worse, that they weren't plotting their own betrayals? These were questions I had to answer in order to move forward. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. It took time, a lot of time, to rebuild my trust in others, and even longer to rebuild my own trust in myself. The fear of being hurt again, of being deceived again, lingered for a long while. But one thing I learned was that trust is something that has to be earned, not just from others but from yourself. And that was the hardest part of all. I had to look at myself in the mirror and accept that I had allowed myself to be manipulated. I had trusted my twin sister not just as family, but as the one person who was supposed to always have my back. That trust had been shattered, and it left a scar, a reminder of how vulnerable I had been. But healing meant acknowledging that I couldn't keep blaming myself for what she did. I had to take responsibility for my own choices and learn from them. As I began to reclaim my life, I also realized that I couldn't do it alone. I needed support. Therapy became a crucial part of my journey. It wasn't easy at first. Talking about the emotional betrayal, the financial manipulation, and the breakdown of my relationships felt like tearing open old wounds that hadn't even started healing. But with each session, I felt like I was peeling back another layer of the pain, inch by inch. Therapy helped me process the anger, the hurt, and the betrayal in a way that was constructive instead of destructive. It was like a lifeline in the midst of a storm. Another aspect of healing was reconnecting with the people who had truly supported me throughout this ordeal. Some friends had stuck by me through thick and thin, while others had drifted away, influenced by my sister's lies. It was painful, but I had to let go of those relationships that had been built on falsehoods. It was time to focus on the people who had shown me real love and loyalty. Rebuilding my social circle with people I could trust, people who had never been swayed by my sister's lies, was a crucial step in reclaiming my sense of self. Eventually, I started to feel more like myself again. The broken pieces of my life didn't fit perfectly back together, but they fit well enough. I could move forward with my head held high, knowing that I had taken control of my own narrative. It wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. And it sure wasn't painless. But the process of reclaiming my life, of healing from the betrayal, taught me some valuable lessons along the way. I learned that life doesn't always go the way we expect it to. That trust can be broken in an instant, but it can also be rebuilt, though it takes time and effort. And most importantly, I learned that no matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how hard the struggle, we all have the strength within us to move forward. The road to recovery isn't linear, but each step brings us closer to healing. So what can we learn from all of this? The truth is, betrayal, whether from a spouse, a sibling, or anyone close to us, has the power to change everything. But it doesn't have to break us. In fact, it can be the very thing that pushes us to rebuild, to reclaim our strength, and to create a future that's better than before. The most important takeaway here is that no matter what, you have the power to choose how to move forward. Yes, it will hurt. Yes, it will shake you to your core. But if you take control of your own story, you can heal and even thrive. So ask yourself, how would you react if you found yourself in a similar situation? What steps would you take to reclaim your life, your trust, and your peace of mind? Think about it. Could you forgive? Could you rebuild the trust that was shattered? And most importantly, how can you make sure something like this never happens again? If you've ever been through betrayal or felt your world collapse because of family drama, drop a comment below. I want to hear how you dealt with it or how you're planning to heal from it. If this video resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification bell, And keep learning how to navigate life's toughest moments with grace and strength. Because, trust me, no matter the challenges, you have what it takes to rise above them.